I want to take this question. What caused the BJP's defeat in Faizabad? So let's see. These are not voters in the seat of Ayodhya. These are general voters. Let's see how they respond to this question. So if I look at the overall numbers, 22.3% of overall voters think that BJP lost in the seat of Ayodhya because there was too much focus on Mandir. 11% say anti-incumbency against the sitting candidate Lallu Singh. 12% say it's because Samajwadi Party fielded Dalit candidate Avdesh. And 36.7% say it's because of BJP's overconfidence. Remember, these are not voters in Ayodhya, so they actually have very little say. But this is their broad sense that 36.7% feel the BJP lost because of overconfidence, that somehow they just convinced themselves that they were winning, that they became victims of their own hype. Do you buy that, Shankar Iyer? This idea that they probably became victims of their own hype, they started believing their own propaganda?
Well, to start with, they announced a 400-part target and didn't bother to explain it to the voters as to what it was about. So it was left to open to interpretations and fears. So interpretations and fears have led to the loss of seats and erosion. The point that we are making about Hindutva, here's the thing. Any time and every time there is an attempt to homogenize a heterogeneous society, it is to make a one image of a plural country, a country of many diversities. It will backfire. It will boomerang. The point that Amitabh made and Yashwant made subsequently is that people are invested in the idea of India being a Hindu society. That idea cannot be leveraged beyond a point for creating a majoritarian state or a majoritarian government. This has happened before, this has happened now. The point that every voter seems to be sort of underlining, whether it is in Maharashtra, whether it is in Uttar Pradesh, whether it is in West Bengal, whether it is in Rajasthan, is that livelihoods matter. And you cannot just say that, okay, January happened and the rest you have to sort of live with it. There is a very old saying from the epics in Mahabharata, fear the tears of the poor, for they can drown the mightiest. I think that is a message that has come through across states, and that is a message that has been observed by the government. The first decision of the government to create 3 crore new houses is both a political compulsion and an economic imperative. And that is where I think Mr. Modi excels in bringing together what he has heard on the ground and how he...
Haj Gupta, respond to Shankar Iyer's very important point. This is not so much about new idea, old idea of India. This is not about pro, anti-Hindutva. This is about listening to the voice of those at the bottom of the pyramid, giving them the economic alleviation that they crave. That this is really what the verdict is about. Listen to concerns of those who are at the bottom of the income pyramid.
Rahul, with 640 million voters, there is no monocausal explanation of any election, much less this election. The point is not that. When I mentioned there is a structural trend in Indian politics, to compare 2019 to 2024 and say that is a structure is the exact opposite of the definition of structural. The structural trend is always a longer term trend. I mentioned there is always mean reversion and overshooting. So to compare 2019 results in 2024 and say that over time Hindu consolidation is not happening is not an academic or rigorous enough answer. Now on the point of Hindutva or aggressive versus non-aggressive, Hindutva, liberal, pluralism, these are all false binaries. These are false divides. Hindutva is nothing but Hinduism. So to say that it is homogenizing is simplifying, homogenizing the discourse itself. I just want to simply say, I fully agree, economic uncertainty, economic pain, as well as overconfidence, as you mentioned, Rahul, in the Faizabad survey, I fully agree those are real causes. Let me remind you that in FY24, nominal GDP growth was less than 10%. The deflator was 1.5%, and which is why the real GDP growth was more than 8%. But for the normal person who's not thinking in terms of inflation adjusted, his salaries or his income grew less than 10%. It is my personal opinion. It is also the opinion during vote on account that the government has been fiscally and monetary policy wise, that includes the RBI, slightly too conservative. In retrospect, obviously, it's easier to confirm that they were perhaps overconfident. And I fully agree with Shankar that the first decisions by signing the, for example, Kisan Nidhi, the second decision of having millions of more homes, shows there is already a feedback mechanism.
Okay,
and
Sanjay Jha, respond to this, that the government was being careful about public finances, which is why they didn't resort to the kind of freebies and populism that the Congress promised. Harsh concedes that maybe this was too tight and they should have loosened up a bit more. It would have helped them, but it's against Prime Minister Modi's fiscal grain. He likes to be conservative. He doesn't like the idea of freebies. They've heard the message and now they'll be more willing to open the purse strings like we saw during the PM Awas Yojana announcement or during the food grains announcement. There'll be more such welfare measures.
You know, Rahul, one of the most shocking statements that Prime Minister Modi made, beyond his bhais and all the Mangal Sutra and all the pretty repugnant gibberish that we heard, was when he told, I think, interviewers, I don't know whether it was on your show, that, what do I do? Some people have to become rich and some people will remain poor, something to that effect. And this coming from India's Prime Minister, I thought was appalling. This is a country which is seeing an absolutely, very dangerous level of economic inequality.
That's not what he said.
People have no idea how many people are suffering at the bottom of the pyramid. Mr. Modi takes credit, by the way, for a man who says, I'm a right-wing, economist thinking man, free market pro. He allows 56% of India's population to get 5 kilo of food grains for the next 5 years and says, well, I have removed poverty. You had Niti Aayog actually telling you that the poverty levels changed within 1 day. So the truth that people have to accept it. I'm telling you, Rahul, I say so. And I challenge anybody from the BJP to take me on. The world does not trust their data. The world does not trust India's GDP. Somebody mentioned GDP deflator. I'll tell you the problem. They have used these deflators to keep the real GDP growth high. But if that was the case,
let Harsh respond to it. The charge that you're making the data seem a lot better than it actually is by fudging it, by inflating it, that India is doing a China.
Absolutely.
And therefore you get convinced that India is growing really fast, but for those who it matters, they feel, no, we're not growing fast.
Rahul, just like in FY24, the GDP deflator was around 1 to 2%. In FY23, the year before that, it was almost double digit. The same government, the same data, which is why when the nominal GDP growth was 18-19% in FY23, they did not show 15-16% real growth. So this is simply a base effect. Let us, I'm requesting Sanjay Jha to understand, the election is over. The next election is some time away. We don't have to do this rhetoric.
Yeah, but let's not fudge around with data.
We are dispassionately analyzing what happened. The GDP deflator was very high.
Sanjay, let him speak. You're not being fair. I'll come back to you. Let him speak.
The deflator was very high in FY23. And the base effect in FY24 was very low, which is why you can see that even in the listed companies, the revenue growth in FY24 was in single digits, but the profitability was 20% plus because the cost pressures came down. So this is not just government data. You can corroborate that with financial market data as well. So to say that this is not the data, nobody believes that this is like the Chinese Communist Party, that is absolutely untrue. What is true is that the census is overdue. The pandemic delayed it. We must do the census. We must update, for example, the 2011-12 base to have more updated inflation data. By the way, the hundreds of millions of people getting free food of 5 kgs, that is not included properly in the CPI data. And which is why the government gets a hit on the fisc, but does not get a free ticket on the monetary policy. This is a problem because you are giving free food that is there on the fiscal side hit, but it is not counted the way CPI is counted. Core inflation in India has been below 4% for more than 7%. Food inflation is above 4%, but then that does not account for 5 kilos.
Rahul, a quick response.
I want to come to the next question. This is to do with, just 1 second, Sanjay, I'm coming back to you, but since this is a show around the questions that we've asked, I want to ensure that none of the survey effort goes waste. So just bear with me for a moment. What worked for the Samajwadi Party Congress India Alliance in Uttar Pradesh? Now, if I look at the various options and take you through what different categories of voters have said, 22.5% say there was consistent messaging on unemployment, which is what worked. 26% of the respondents say constitution is in danger, Samvidhan khatre mein hai, that's the pitch that worked. 24.1% say it's all of the above. So not too many think it's a smooth alliance. Not too many think it's to do with the Pichhda, Dalit, Alpsankyak card. Most think it's because of the fact that they had this idea of constitution is in danger. And 22.5% says the messaging on unemployment, and 24% say it's all of the above. So I want to put this question first to Yashwant Deshmukh. Yashwant, this idea that Samvidhan Khatre mein, BJP is considered to have the best narrative factory or propaganda machine, or get their voice out, get their message out to the public, typically. But this issue about Samvidhan Khatre mein, it's almost as if the opposition created an issue where it didn't really exist, picked the constitution in their hands and ran with it with such ferocity that it really became one of the biggest issues of this election. And the BJP tried very hard to counter it through the barbs on Muslim reservation, etc., but they simply couldn't.
Well, Rahul, even more interesting is the point that be it India voters, be it NDA voters, they are kind of agreeing on these pointers. What has worked and what didn't work for them. And that's a very interesting way of looking at how the public is reading the mandate, And yes, the opposition was smart enough to twist that change in the constitution tune with the reservation that they will, bring down the reservation policy, and like that, politics is about how you fix the narrative, how you toe the narrative. And BJP, by and large, in the 10 years, has been a champion of that. But I think this time, on this particular narrative, I think on this one occasion, they had to face the checkmate on that. Reason being, after a long time, and probably when those who are watching or going through the social media and everything, I could sense, I might be completely wrong, Amitabh, but I could sense that BJP's entire social media narrative mechanism could not match the narrative mechanism.
Harsh Gupta, do you concede this? Usually it's the BJP that sets the agenda, the opposition is scrambling, trying to respond. Here the opposition created an agenda which never existed. There was no real plan of ever dismantling the constitution, but yet they put it out with such ferocity, and it also happens only when people are willing to believe it. So obviously people felt there was a grain of truth, and one thing led to another. It became one of the biggest issues, and the mightiest narrative machine that we know couldn't counter it.
So Rahul, I'm not fully disagreeing with you. Let me just say, let us be very specific. To run fake videos, completely fake videos of former president and current home minister, BJP president, Amit Shah, saying that quotas will be removed, caste quotas will be removed, when he, as you rightly mentioned, never ever said that, I would not exactly use the word smart for that. I would use the word fraudulent or cynical for that. But nonetheless, I fully agree with your point that perhaps if there are a lot of people willing to buy it, there is some introspection necessary to be done about the broader narrative without in any way denying the fraud that was done. And therefore, to that extent, the BJP's overall social media might need a course correction, because in 2014 to 19 to 2024, it was perhaps more organic. Of late, perhaps it became slightly inorganic. That does not mean that they did not do a good job. We should also not discount the fact that a lot of foreign powers spent a lot of resources for influencers who were not necessarily living in India to try to influence this election.
Okay, Sanjay Jha is blaming social media influencers allegedly paid by foreign powers, like Indira Gandhi is saying, Videsh ka haath hai isme, in the Modi defeat. Or not, this is far from a defeat, frankly. Just the fact that there were, which is why we need to look at victory and defeat in the right lens. 240 is still one of the best performances by any party in modern India. But he's saying Videshi powers ka haath hai. Let Sanjay Jha respond to that.
The right wing is expert in creating conspiracy theories and fake news, and they have been answered in this election. Let me also tell you, Rahul, for the benefit of your viewers, Modi's 240 is actually, frankly speaking, a defeat, political and moral, because this was not a level playing field contest. I think this is what every citizen in this country needs to know, and they know it today. The capture of regulatory authorities, the vulnerability of the election commission, large sections of the big media becoming the cheerleader. You had tons of money through electoral bonds lying with the BJP, arresting of the opposition, chief ministers. It was a brazen, one-sided show, which is the cockiness which made Modi say, I'm winning this election, and start celebrating, the next 100 days. You remember in Bihar, he was campaigning I mean, he made a statement that I thought was absolutely reprehensible, where he talked about Tejasvi Yadav, the countdown to his arrest has begun. This was the narrative of the BJP. And here is the truth, Rahul. Here is the truth. The truth is that social media is inherently an anti-establishment platform.
Sure.
The BJP used it in 2014. Today, it is now questioning the BJP and Mr. Modi. Mr. Modi, by the way, is in memes all over. But why are we forgetting that the CSDS survey said that Rahul Gandhi as a prime ministerial candidate is more popular than Modi in Uttar Pradesh? The defeat in Ayodhya is a message that no matter how hard the gentlemen here in this program can try, the new idea of India, one strongman leader, personality cult, sectarianism, authoritarianism, has been rejected.
Yashwant Deshmukh, I'm out of time. One very final question. What would you as a data analyst be looking at most carefully from here on? What do you think matters most in determining what happens next?
Well, I think the leadership ratings are going to be the central of that, because no matter what, even though we are parliamentary system, but the way we think is pretty much presidential, and it is getting more and more around that. And this is why majority of the really strong chief ministers have won their states, defeating BJP in the last 10 years. And this is why even in the worst of this last 10 years thing, where at the national level, the BJP manages to be the single largest party and NDA crosses the majority on its own, all because of Prime Minister Modi's popularity. So having said that, what Sanjay is mentioning, that data point is, Sanjay, a bit... not very. I mean, I would contest that, but it has to be seen with the lens that if you are running a 2-horse race in Uttar Pradesh right now, where Samajwadi Party voters are behind you, then you are likely to get that kind of result. Particularly when you have a significantly big number of voters propping up Yogi's name. But as far as Yogi and Modi are considered, they belong to the same party, same category. So it's a win some and lose some logic, Sanjay. I understand your point where you are coming from.
Okay.
And this is what precisely is required if the opposition wants to take it forward. They have to have a central narrative. They won a number of seats, creating a local narrative, which was a very smart thing to do. But at the end of the day, when you are running the country, there has to be a central narrative. So we need to see how that contest of narratives in the parliament and outside the parliament goes from here, Rahul.
Okay,
that's a
very fascinating conversation. This 40 minutes of very high quality insights. I want to thank all our guests for joining us in this edition of the Political Stock Exchange. I hope to pick up important issues of the week in the days and weeks to come, and keep doing this because it gives you insights into not just what the pundits are thinking, but also what voters across the country are thinking on this key issue.